Ashley Gattuso. We are joined here today by Dennis Shiao. Welcome, Dennis.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for having me.
If you haven't seen Dennis's newsletter already, go subscribe right now. It is the Content Corner. I'm going to have all the links to every website, every newsletter we mention during this show in the description on YouTube. But Content Corner has been an amazing newsletter I started getting, I don't know, like 5-6 months ago, and I look forward to it. It's every other Friday. Dennis is also a marketing consultant, and he organizes the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup, which has transitioned from in-person to online with COVID-19. He's going to tell us a little bit about that. I think the way we met actually was that I curated one of your articles in my very first issue of Opt-in Weekly, because it was a great piece in maybe content.
I think it was CMS Wire.
Yes, CMS Wire. Yeah. And I'm excited about this discussion that we're about to have, because I think you have some great perspective on what it is that newsletter creators need to be doing in their newsletter content, but also, like, no one is an island, right? Very few people are only sending an email. They are putting content in multiple places, and they need to package it and that story correctly in all of those places. So I thought that your perspective, I feel like it was about how to treat newsletters more like you are writing something to a friend, and go in that direction. And I have taken that to heart. So thank you for your guidance.
Oh, sure thing.
and I think that, like, knowing how to treat each channel is really important. So I'd love for us to get into that. But without further ado, if you want to introduce yourself and give us just like a career background, because you're a marketing consultant. I find that interesting. And then we will bleed into like looking at Content Corner and all the decisions that you've made as you put out that newsletter.
Sounds good. I have an aside before I get into my intro, if you don't mind. So it was really interesting when you started. You said creator of the Content Corner newsletter. I'll have the links in the notes.
Yes.
When Content Corner first started getting a little bit popular, I would have similar scenarios where, like, it would get mentioned. So pretend like it's a podcast, and the host talks to me about my newsletter, but let's say they forget to put the link in the show notes.
Yes.
So I decided, for this scenario where my newsletter is mentioned, and even if it's like word of mouth, like one person mentions it to someone else at a coffee shop, I wanted somebody to be able to go to Google, search Content Corner newsletter, and find me. So long story short, I'm still working on a website for my business. So right now I'm just using medium.com as the publishing site. So I quickly crafted a post on Medium, and I optimized it for the term Content Corner newsletter.
So
and the post, yes.
That's how we get there. Excellent.
That's right. So it's like a quick overview. I have screenshots. I have links to past issues. So I didn't want to just make it like a low value page. I wanted it to be like, give a really nice background. And I would recommend that to newsletter creators, which is like, you've got some brand established with the name of your newsletter. Make sure it ranks on Google for some page that gives people, and of course you have the link to subscribe on my Medium post.
Right.
And what else? And then I link to that in my newsletter. So at the top, it says, want some background on this newsletter? And I link to it, that post.
So there's no chance that someone is going to like get that and be like, I never subscribed to this. They can go and find it and figure out what they did. Great. So, people, if you're listening, make sure that when someone Googles your brand / newsletter or whatever like terms you can think of that you want to rank for, that it is ranking for those. I believe that I'm ranking for Opt-in Weekly, but I haven't checked that in a few weeks. So everyone go test that for me now and put that in the comments.
So there's some domain called contentcorner.biz. So if you only search for Content Corner, that will show up first, but I think my post will show up. But more commonly, people will probably, if they heard some reference, they'll probably search like Content Corner and my name or Content Corner newsletter. And in that case, hopefully that Medium post shows up in the top 3.
Smart thinking. I like it. Okay, so before you became really adept at figuring out how to rank on Googled through Medium. Um,
Yeah.
you have a lot of content out there. You are
Uh-huh.
a marketing consultant. What brought you into marketing, and what have you been doing for the last, lifetime?
Yes, thanks for bringing us back. I just realized I didn't answer your first question. So
It's okay.
I've been a marketing consultant for only about 2.5 years. Before that, I was in full-time roles in product marketing and content marketing, primarily for B2B software companies.
Mhm.
And then before that, I actually spent the first half of my career in IT. So I have a degree in computer science, and I started life as a developer.
So you're the marketer who can code
Well, I
ish.
guess ish, very, very ish. Like I used to code for a living,
Hmm.
and then that was many years ago. So I've gotten rusty. I haven't kept up my coding, but that means that like HTML, I can figure it out because I'm a coder.
I
Like I,
guarantee you're better than me. I can get into some code and like replace an image or do
yeah,
some things, but I very much, when I started working on websites, was when products like Wix were
yes,
available, and I
yep,
I transitioned from like the Joomla and
right,
WordPress to Wix because
okay.
I learned design on Quark.
Oh, cool.
And so I was like, this is just like Quark. You just make the squares line up. And
Right.
so um, that's an interesting transition. Do you feel like being a developer first helped you as a product marketer to really get into the product marketing and understand like what pain points it was solving
Yes, for
for the
sure.
audience?
Yes, I think where it's helped a lot is, and I'm still not, even though I have a technical background, if I'm working with a tech client, I have nowhere near the subject matter expertise as their in-house experts. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can't, so I don't really do well writing pure technical content today. But where it helps is that a lot of clients will hire me to help with marketing content like website copy, email copy, even maybe a product collateral, like a data sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, I'm able to, so if the end customer is not, say, an engineer, like I wouldn't be able to write some to market, say, a software development tool
Right.
at the technical level. But if it's a business user of a technology vendor, I can help translate what the technology does in a way that the business user can appreciate.
Is
It's
that
like that.
especially true for a marketer who is the stakeholder decision maker?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's like a marketer buying MarTech, then
Mm-hmm.
I can help translate what the product manager of the MarTech solution's saying to the marketer who's buying the MarTech.
That's
So it does help.
interesting. That's
Yep.
interesting because I've always thought like the best marketers, well, I have a journalism background. So clearly I'm like biased towards storytellers and people who can become mini experts in something and then retell it in a way that actually conveys the truth of what they have studied. But I went through kind of a transition period as a copywriter for circuitcity.com.
Okay.
So
Cool.
doing product stuff, and I was working for Firedog, which was the Geek Squad like equivalent for
Okay.
Best Buy, and like so I would take the tech instructions like for adding RAM to computers or things like that and
Uh-huh.
translate that into like, and how do we sell this as an add-on to a computer cell? Uh,
Nice.
so I think that the best marketers are able to translate from
Hmm.
the way one genre or industry mind thinks and speaks
Right.
to the way another one. So it's like a conduit through which this
Yeah.
information should flow. Very cool.
Exactly.
So what sparked the launch of your newsletter?
Ah, there's there's a long story. I'll try to condense it though. Like there's a very specific reason I launched the newsletter, and it has to do with the meetup. So
Okay.
the meetup I launched in 2015. So we're actually now in our 6th year, which is I find pretty amazing.
Yes.
And we used meetup.com, which is a platform that it's got millions of users who look for in-person events. Obviously, these days, most of the events they're listing are online events.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pay a subscription fee to meetup.com to host my meetup group and promote it to my members. But one of the benefits is that other people that are members of Meetup can find the group and join and RSVP to our events.
Mm-hmm.
However, the business model of meetup.com is they don't give me access. So we're currently over 1,000 members. A lot of that growth was during the pandemic when people found this online. I don't have the email addresses of any of my members because I have to use the platform to reach them.
Mm-hmm.
If Meetup gave me the email address of all my members, technically I could leave. I can leave the platform.
They're holding those hostage.
Yeah, to a degree. So I was inspired to create the newsletter, Content Corner, as a way initially just as a channel to my Meetup members to tell them about upcoming meetups.
Okay.
Now there's a chicken and egg problem because I don't have their email addresses. So how do you create a newsletter? What I did was I found let's say 20 to 50 people that I knew personally that were part of the group for whom I had their email address. And I asked them, is it okay if I'm creating this newsletter, can I add you? And they most of them said yes. So then I started to build my own list, and I branched out with content in the newsletter beyond just the meetup. Because if you're just promoting a meetup, it's like, what's the value of the newsletter anyway? So it's taken on a life of its own, but that was the origin story, was trying to reach people to promote upcoming meetups.
Okay, I like that story though, because you needed it to serve a certain purpose. It has evolved, but I think a lot of people have like a massive end goal in mind, which is like, this will be a business. And not to say that there's anything wrong with that end goal, but oftentimes launching newsletters it takes a lot of effort. It needs to be something you're passionate about, and it takes a while to build an audience. And so I think a lot of people expect like huge growth, and then they understand, oh no, this is more of a persistence game. So your meetup increased with COVID. Did it expand beyond Bay Area people? Okay.
For sure.
Excellent.
Yeah, we keep Bay Area content, Bay Area in our name because that's our history. And we will at some point return to in-person in the Bay Area when it's safe to do so. But that was the reason for the growth, is that people are now searching Meetup for any event because they're all online for the most part. So we've had, we do the meetups at noon Pacific. So it's like lunchtime. And one of our members coined them Zooms at noon. We use the Zoom platform. And we've attracted people in the UK and Italy, so it's evening for them. And we even have a regular who joins us from India. I think it's like 13 hours ahead for him, so it's middle of the night. But yeah, we now have a global audience. Yeah.
So I would love for you to screen share. I think I've enabled that. And for people to see what Content Corner looks like.
Okay.
It was a no-brainer to me as a content marketer to subscribe right away. And what he's showing you right now is actually, I requested that we look at this particular issue because it starts out with some predictions for 2021 that I think are inspirational. And I am like transparent about some that I'm like, should I, shouldn't I? What do you do as a marketer when you're faced with this situation? So there's some in there that are kind of challenging, but this gives you an idea of like how the header and the call to subscribe and what that background of the newsletter, which leads to the Medium article, is like up in the header and subhead text, I would call that. And then how you kind of launch into your equivalent of an intro, like a personal something from Dennis. So would you like to walk us through what your predictions are for 2021 marketing?
Sure thing. Can I tell a really quick meetup story first? Since
yes, okay. Of course.
So quick story is, so it's meetup.com. There's members globally. I forgot the latest number, but it's in the tens of millions or maybe more. When we were doing face-to-face meetups, there was one time where there was a couple. We used to get together, have pizza, and do a talk on marketing. And it was towards the end of the meetup, and I happened to ask the couple, "Where are you joining us from today?" And they said, "Kazakhstan." And I said, "What? Are you serious?" And so, yeah, they were a couple from Kazakhstan. They visited the US. They were in San Francisco area. They're members of meetup.com. They
Mm-hmm.
had no plans that night. So they did a quick search and they found our meetup. They signed up for it. It has the address. So they showed up. A similar story a few years later was a woman who was visiting from Tokyo also showed up at our meetup. So it's just amazing how this platform can bring people together from across the
Yeah,
world in
it
person.
makes, well, it's interesting because in those cases, it made your event a tourist attraction,
I didn't think of
right?
it that
Like
way.
when you
Yeah.
go to the Bay Area, you've got to go check out Dennis Child's meetup.
Oh my God,
Like
that's so funny.
that's interesting. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And they found their
Yeah,
way to
it's
the
amazing.
content corner after that, we all assume.
I We'll have to see. I don't know if I can connect the dots quite so elegantly, but that would be amazing if they signed up for the newsletter.
I'm wrapping up the story with a kicker that we just imagined
Yes.
to be true.
That's right. It, if you imagine it to be true, it's true.
Almost.
So by the way, here's
Mhm.
the that Medium post I mentioned at the beginning. You'll see here it's got some overview. You can go to past issues.
When you write for
Backstory.
CMS Wire, is there a link to this?
A link to this post?
Possibly. Maybe I found you on LinkedIn. I remember I read an article on CMS Wire and then I looked you up and then I somehow found Content Corner. And it
Oh,
had to either
yeah,
be through
yeah.
your LinkedIn profile or through like your writer bio.
Yeah, exactly. My bio, because so I'm going to be launching my own website in 2021 for my business, I have the domain, but it doesn't exist.
Yay.
So I kind of use Medium as my anchor
Mm-hmm.
for content. So I put my Medium profile in my author bios. So yes.
Perfect.
Yep.
I knew I somehow, like, I was like, what was my customer journey flow through this process? Okay, 2021 predictions. This was great,
Yes.
y'all. It sparked, I don't know if you got responses from other people, but it definitely like had me thinking. I love it when someone challenges me. And I immediately was like, I got to tell him this is good. Here's what I'm not doing well at.
Yeah, I did get some, yeah, definitely got some replies. And that's a great measure that I think software can't, like MailChimp and other platforms can't measure, as far as I know, can't measure replies. Like they have all these
Mm-hmm.
metrics, open rate, click rate, unsubscribe. But the one that's most important to me is how many people replied to the latest issue, because that really tells you, like you can get a stray click, a stray open, you can get an open and then an unsubscribe. But
Right.
when someone replies and tells you, they're actually telling you what they thought, even if it's just like a one word bravo, that's it. It's an indicator that's almost invaluable to me. So I
I
really
agree.
love replies. Yeah.
I agree. It's like if you don't do this and you read newsletters, please do it. It makes the person who sent it to you so happy. And it's not just like yours made them happy, but like just one word, even like bravo. Or I
Right.
sent Margot Aaron masterpiece the other day because what she wrote captivated me. And I think that it's, it's email. It's worth treating it like email.
Yeah.
Right.
So I won't go through all these. They're actually more of, I guess, is any of it predict? They're mostly I couch it as advice. So for marketers, here's what I recommend you think about for 2021.
Right. Okay.
And
excuse me for calling it
oh,
predictions.
that's okay.
Everyone edit. This is his advice of how to zig
My advice,
when others zag. Okay.
Yeah, and then the theme is to do things that other people are not, or they're not thinking. So for instance, even though thankfully we have the vaccine, we're talking about a return to normalcy. My thought was, well, maybe just think about if events don't return in 2021, what would you do? Because if you do that, maybe as your competitors are busy saying, let's make sure we get our in-person conference ready for June, you could be taking your virtual events and making them like the world's best.
Or maybe not paying for travel and hosting something that not just the Bay Area can attend.
Yeah, exactly.
Or people don't have to travel to attend. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And then, so I'll just pick out particular ones that I like the most. I have a huge pet peeve with marketers that they don't talk to their customers enough. They're great at marketers are great at spending money, at showing new logos, at saying how great their MarTech stack is. But have you talked to a customer? When's the last time you talked to a customer? So I say speak to 52, one per week.
That is a good challenge.
Yeah.
Now, do you lump customers and prospects into this, like people who are your ideal client? Okay, then I'm on my way.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, prospects are interesting because usually in like a lot of B2B companies, if it's a prospect, the salesperson kind of owns that. Sales does not want marketing talking to a prospect. And a prospect, if they're not doing business with you yet, they're like, why does marketing want to even speak to me? I'm still deciding. But if you have the opportunity, those are great people because they're still considering whether your product is right.
Yes. I think I will add to this, someone who could be a prospect is a great person to talk to. Like the conversation you and I are having right now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Because you fit what my product should be attracting. But I'm not going to have a conversation with you about my product. I'm going to have a conversation about your newsletter. And whatever happens, but I become a marketer who knows a little bit more about what the people I should be attracting think.
Right. Yep. It's just good marketing to speak to people because then you're better informed on how to reach others like me who could become customers.
Yeah. Okay, yes. So everybody go do a video show right now. Just kidding.
Exactly. Let's see what else is there. This one is interesting. I think maybe you might have replied to me about this one. I've been in so many companies where I get called out, like the boss's boss said, hey, you just tweeted one of the links to our competitor. They're like, that it was like the worst crime ever to give a shout out to your competitor. But guess what? Yeah. I mean, we're all part of the same community. I think too many companies think zero-sum game, like whatever benefits my competitor harms me. But you might even surprise them. It's like, whoa, why were they sharing our content? Maybe we should share some of theirs.
It's true. So I've been thinking through the psychology of this, and you're right that there is like a C-suite level fear. Like, do you have a fear of frustrating the people you work with? But I think that there is also, like, if we're thinking of brands like human beings who should be nodding their head to each other when someone does something well, that this could be like a good surprise play that people can take. So I'm contemplating whether that should be done just like spontaneously as a reaction to a thing, or if it should be like given a day or two to strategize and know exactly what you're going to do. Because I think we overthink things a lot, but that we can also like jump the gun and do something that we later are like, oh no, why did I do that? So great thing to ponder there. I think number 7 is interesting too. I'm a big fan of number 7.
Oh, so quick note on number 8. I think it can also attract the attention of your prospects. It's like this company is sharing content from their competitors. It might increase trust in you, in your brand.
Right, because you're willing to say like, hey, they got it right with this.
Exactly.
Like I'm going to amplify good voices no matter whose voices they are.
Yep.
Very cool. Okay.
And this, number 7 is almost like a religious topic. It's like people will debate either side, like how can you give away your best content? But I sometimes see cases where you have gated content and you look at the people that sign up for it, and it's all like they're not giving you their information anyway. They don't want you to contact them. So why not just give it to them? And maybe if it's that good, it will make a difference to them, and then hopefully they will contact you when the time is right.
I think I would add to that, you're also potentially wasting your sales motions time.
Exactly.
With the leads that you send who are coming in from gated content, because they convert at such lower rates than people who ask for demos.
Exactly.
Right?
Totally agree. Yep.
That's like the worst, like download the ebook, then get the sales call. Like that's the worst sequence in the world.
Yeah. And I was at a company once where we had a really successful Facebook ads campaign, and we were able to generate a cost per lead of like single-digit dollars for an ebook. And then we had a sales development team, so their job was to spend the entire day on the phone tracking down these leads. And it was such a false premise, because while Facebook did convert for us and get us leads, they were all completely random people that had no connection to, they would never be a buyer. So it really frustrated the sales development reps, and it not only frustrated them as individuals, but it wasted the company's resources on all those phone calls.
Yep. So it's like, you're right. It's like a false success.
Yep.
In many ways, because it's creating more work that is going to maybe succeed at quite a low rate. Like I'm not going to say like someone who downloads it won't convert eventually, but was it worth all the time and the money? Right. Yeah. And smiling more often. Oh wait, but you're going to the email nurture, I bet, because that pertains to this audience. Okay. Yeah. Talk about the nurture and the death of it. Let's have a funeral right now.
Obviously, this is my opinion. So I've seen so many nurture campaigns. So for those who might not be familiar with what I'm talking about, this is primarily, and I think it's true for both B2B and B2C. It's the concept where like you get someone to opt into your list. So you have their email address, and ideally, like from a sales point of view, you get them into your list and they're ready to buy your product, which, sometimes it happens, but often it doesn't. So instead, what happens is marketing says, okay, we'll put them on the nurture track, which is like they use their marketing automation platform to send them a series of emails. Like marketers spend weeks designing the flow, the timing, like every 3 days, 4 days, how you're going to take a top of the funnel message and slowly move them down. I've never seen a lead that's from the nurture campaign convert to an opportunity ever. So maybe I was just on bad marketing teams, but maybe also like if someone's not ready to engage with you and you're just going to send them these emails, like I happen to receive emails where I know that I'm being nurtured, and I'm like, most often I just unsubscribe. So like, I think just skip that whole approach and just create like an amazing newsletter that they will opt into from the beginning, and you'll just keep them engaged forever.
I like that. I think I've preached a little bit of this and gotten some pushback in some areas, but because I say newsletter feels more like choose my own adventure, right? Because I can choose to continue opening this. I know it's good information. They're establishing a relationship with me. If that newsletter compels me to do so, then I can take the next step with the product purchase or a demo or some trial or something. But someone who's really into automating and figuring out all the branches will say, well, it can be a choose your own adventure. If you engage with this CTA, then we send you this. But I think at a point, it's almost like dehumanizing the back and forth, because the newsletter is like from a person. And even though the nurture email could be from a person, it still reeks of scalable things that someone could say to get you interested in something. So I feel like the newsletter, when done well, can deliver value in a much more relational way and a much more real time. Like, this happened last week. What do you think about it? Instead of like, we've set this up to be evergreen, so you'll never guess it's not real.
That's right.
Okay, so everybody, this is airing after the holidays, but now you've got your 2021. You can go reference this and see which of these you agree with and have challenged you yourself or your team to follow. So now we'll get into kind of the newsletters bit. I did want to focus on that because you come in as a marketing consultant, you have some great ideas, and this really shows the power of starting with something personal from you at the top of your newsletter. I'd love for you to give us now just like a tour of Content Corner, the newsletter itself, and let me shut up and you steer.
So quick side note. So this is my Medium profile. I used to publish fairly regularly, like maybe once or twice a month on Medium. But what I've discovered is that, so in the past, I might write a post like this and maybe add a little bit more meat because this doesn't feel like blog post worthy, just this one little thing. And I might publish it on Medium. What I found is I just take original. So this right here, you won't find anywhere else. Like I haven't published this anywhere else. And I just keep it exclusive to my newsletter subscribers. And I now use my newsletter as the channel to share what I'm thinking. If I published on Medium, there might be some people on Medium, or if I tweet it, you might find it. But with my newsletter, I know that there are some number of my subscriber base that will open it and read it. So it's almost like I'm guaranteed that some number, even if it's like not tens of thousands of people, will read it. So I've shifted to my thinking of my newsletter as one of my primary sources, besides like getting published elsewhere, of sharing with people what I'm thinking.
Okay, I like that.
Cool. And then this, I will occasionally just drop in a link to a tweet. So let me just click on this. So this was as I was composing that issue. So you see here, the subject line was 2021 advice for marketers. When I was setting it up in MailChimp, I wrote 2020 because that's the current year. So obviously that's that's like 1 year behind. So if I sent out a newsletter saying 2020 advice, they'd be like, what are you talking about? So I tweeted about it.
Should have done.
Yeah. So then I kind of tried to make my own little funny joke saying, this is what I caught myself doing, and that's so 2020 of me. And what I found was when I checked the report, a lot of people clicked on this. So I think there's a couple things happen here. One is people are curious because I didn't reveal. If I just told them what I tweeted, they would just be like, that's nice. But because I just referred to it offhandedly, a lot of people clicked on this. And then I even noticed that later that day, some of my newsletter subscribers replied to me on Twitter, which told me that they saw the link and they saw the tweet in the newsletter.
You created like a multi-channel conversation about the subject line of your newsletter. I love it.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Okay, so I just love I'm trying to think of what I'm trying to say. The word corner, you'll see, appears in every section. And I just love to play with how I label each section with the word corner. And sometimes I'll have, so these two are fixed in every issue. Around the corner used to be a heck of a lot of curated content. I learned that like if I include 10 links, it might not be that valuable. So I usually just do like one link and I do a lot of my commentary. I think people, even if people don't click on this link, they might, if they read my commentary and don't click, it still might be valuable. And this is a regular feature where I find someone on Twitter and give them a shout out. So this is my friend Jackie. And then again, I love just dropping in tweets. So I mentioned like Jackie tweeted a photo of herself, and this happens to be her with her Cleveland Browns lanyard.
Yeah.
What else? So in this around the corner, I was talking about the concept of charting your career path, which I think is a very relevant topic right now. I linked to something I wrote about on that topic. Oh, so I was trying to remember what I was doing here. So I linked to something I wrote about, but most of this is below here is an additional story. So it's almost like the same intro. And the story was about how a friend of mine recommended me to a mutual friend, or no, not a mutual friend. A friend of me recommended me to his friend who was thinking about a career change from technical writer to product marketer. And I just gave the story of his situation and my suggestion to him. Basically, my suggestion was, he's been 20 years at the same company, so he's got a lot of credibility at that company, and he works with product marketing. So my suggestion was, just do some product marketing on your own and then send it to them and say, hey, what do you think of this? And then maybe if it's so good, they might recruit him into the position that he wants without him asking for it.
Yes, just dabble.
Exactly.
Yeah, to
just
see.
Just do it.
So is around the corner, give everyone a sense of what usually drives the content decision for that section. Is it linking to something you've written recently, or is it like topic on my mind kind of stuff?
It's more, I do link to stuff that I write, but I try not to, because I really want not to promote what I've written, but what other people have written. This is a counterexample because I did write this.
Okay.
But it's almost like it used to be just third-party content, and I would include what I thought my readers would find valuable. But I've morphed it into a continuation of the intro. So it's almost like, I'm going to also tell you some stories or tell you what's on my mind. So in some cases, I didn't even include a link in a section, but other times I include a link, but then I sprinkle in a lot of my own commentary, which, by the way, is an approach I would recommend people when they curate content on social media. Share with us why you're sharing it. Don't just share the title and the link. That doesn't give us much value.
You can't just go and drop links everywhere.
You could, but I recommend you not.
Okay. No platform is rewarding the link and leave strategy anymore, just in case anyone's wondering. Okay, so I love that you highlight and amplify the voices of others in the little Twitter corner, newsletter corner. Can you kind of walk us through these corners that you have created?
Yeah.
And what inspired them, and what kind of engagement you get around those particular corners? I've been in a corner once. Thanks so much.
That's right.
Yes.
I promoted
it was exciting.
Opt-in Weekly. Yeah.
I didn't know it was coming. It was so exciting. Big moment.
I do like to surprise people, because it's almost like a small world in a sense, where people, not surprisingly, people subscribe to your newsletter who you already know, like your friends and colleagues. So it's and then there's of course people that I don't know, and they found their newsletter. I mean, my newsletter is the only way they know me, which is like a benefit in its own right. But sometimes it feels like a small family, where I will find one of my friends' content and include it, and they, like, the surprise it creates is it's great. It makes me happy when they're
it's akin to the feeling of someone responding to your email.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
It's recognition in like a delightful package.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So the original inspiration was do something like personal in the intro. This originally was, you can even tell by the name, Around the Corner. It was things I'm reading. Twitter corner is self-explanatory. When you're on mobile, this is like obviously desktop, it's all one column. So Around the Corner is above Twitter corner. And I generally find that as the further you go down, which not surprisingly, is maybe a little bit less read or clicked, just because it requires further scrolling.
Right.
But after these two, here's the original genesis for this newsletter. This whole thing was the reason I created it. Like, this is our next meetup. So I always have a section here that gives them a link to RSVP. And then after that, everything here is all custom per each week. So it's interesting things I found. This was a fantastic story of a professional baseball team hiring their first ever female GM. So I called it Congrats Corner. And then I sprinkled in the fact that there's a connection to the baseball team I happen to root for, the New York Yankees. This was a fantastic story of a former NFL coach who learned at his father's funeral that his father was a Tuskegee Airman. Or, I'm sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. Tuskegee Airman. It's an article at ESPN, so I wrote about this. I noticed recently that one of my subscribers saw this and tweeted it tagged Tony Dungy. He didn't reply. He didn't engage, if that's what you were all wondering. But the subscriber obviously gave me an @ mention as for finding the article. So it's a case where someone found the content in the newsletter and tweeted it, which is also very rewarding to me.
Right. Like that's our goal. Write something worth sharing. Exactly. Write something that sticks in someone's mind. If you're forgotten, you're not too far away from getting unsubscribed.
And I will drop a little humble brag. Hopefully this is not too revealing, but Anne Hanley happens to subscribe to my newsletter. Yay! And one time she tweeted a piece of content that I shared in the newsletter, and she tagged me. So one of the queens of newsletters found some of my content valuable. I
now feel like I should have dressed nicer for this interview.
But I mean, that's the amazing things that can happen. You never know who's going to subscribe to your newsletter. Then this is more just content. It was an interesting story about our former CTO in the federal government. I called it Inclusive Corner because she's now working on inclusivity. And I guess this goes on some more. Then I featured a replay from one of our meetup talks with my friend Jeremy. Oh, this was kind of a regular for whatever reason. It's low in this issue, but I like to feature either an entire podcast or a specific podcast episode. Okay. It's often one that I recently discovered. So this was one with Katie Couric. And that takes you through the entire issue.
Nice. So I do like that you have some like you're not afraid to create a new section.
Yes.
If something warrants being included, but that you also have some standards that we're always looking for. Like I'm always I wonder who's in the Twitter corner, or I wonder who's in the newsletter corner, or some things like that. So recurring corners, say that 5 times fast. It's a recurring corner, is a great way to do that. I want to get into what kind of helped you make decisions along the way, and then also how you go about gathering this content over a 2-week, like every 2 weeks, how much time are you spending and what are you doing? Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the biggest tip or the biggest thing that I learned recently. So it's every other Friday, which means when let's say the current issue went out today, let's say it's a Friday, I kind of am like, oh, great, I don't have to think about it again for 2 weeks, right? But that would be wrong. I find that if I can start the next issue on the following Friday, so 1 week in advance, it's always a better issue. So I'll start to cobble together. I actually sometimes have a hard time, like, what am I going to write about in the intro? People you might say, oh, it's always so great, which would be nice of you, but sometimes it's like it takes me so long to figure out what to write about.
It's tough sometimes. There's like a lot of pressure if you have a really good one to be really good the next week.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so sometimes it's going to be a dud, right? Just like any social media post. Like sometimes you just put something out there and then you try to figure out if it's gonna hit. Okay, so do you start thinking about that intro that entire week before?
No, not really. What I usually do is I kind of just I go off to other things. The newsletter is not on my mind for that week, but once it hits Friday, I start to think about putting it together. Actually, no, I will sometimes occasionally, as the week heads towards that first Friday, brainstorm a little bit about what will go in the intro. Then if I can, on that Friday, 1 week out, start to put the skeleton together, and I actually write the intro in a Google Doc, so I'm not like typing literally into MailChimp, because I feel like the offline setting puts less pressure on me. But if I can, and obviously throughout the week, I'm looking for interesting content that I can include. I found that if I can start to stage the issue the 1 week in advance, so like the basic elements are there, then it always turns out much better, because that second week, which is the week leading up to the next send, I will finalize things, or I will find new things and just add them in. So it's like that get started early and give yourself time for you to find new things, or for you to decide, I didn't like that intro, I'm going to go with a different one. So like time is time is on your side.
So how often do you draft something that you end up completely changing?
Not too often. I guess
Okay.
I'm kind of lucky. The main times when I will do that, it's not for the writing itself, it's for like the topic, or I might go down a certain alley and then I'll think about it and say, I don't know if this even works or if anyone really would find it interesting. So then I'll just find something else.
So I'm the writer who has a stockpile of stuff I've written that I've decided isn't good enough.
Okay.
And I just like put it to the side and I'm like, it's not there. I can't use it this week. I'm doing something else. And somehow I always get something out there, but occasionally 2 or 3 days out for me is the sweet spot, because there's the pressure, but I will not lie. Every once in a while, it's 2 hours before. And somehow those become better than the others because I've just forced it to happen. But there has to be some, I think I'm like you in that I'm an outliner. In my head, I'm always outlining what would be good to talk about and make some notes about that. So as long as I have like an idea of what I think I might be about to say, I'm okay. But I prefer 2 or 3 days for like having some people read it and edit it and refine it, so that like 2 hours before a bit it kills me. Like the emotional writer's roller coaster of, will I have this out in the time that I want to have it out? Because nobody's holding like something to you saying like, you must send at 10 a.m. on whatever date, but it's nice to meet your own deadlines. So that's interesting. And then the information that you're pulling, like deciding on a Twitter person to profile, or you see an interesting story, are you collecting links into a Google Doc or in your MailChimp account? Like what's happening there?
I use the same Google Doc that I stage the intro in. So I'll just put links in there. And I'll be honest, on the Twitter corner, it's often who has been in my notifications recently. So if like someone tweeted me, or if maybe not just the notifications, but if somebody emailed me or like they're fresh in my mind, I kind of just go there.
I like that though, because that's an indication of like who's causing the conversations that you're having. Maybe that's conversation corner. Ooh, in your mind. Maybe that's
very interesting.
Yeah. So like that's what's top of mind is how I would identify that.
That's right.
Very cool. Okay. So have you, throughout the process of the newsletter, had feedback from people who liked the addition of a certain section or even didn't? And what advice would you give people about letting their newsletter evolve into its being?
So on the first question, this goes back to the replies. A lot of the feedback. Well, I get replies to the email, and then I'll sometimes get tweets. So it's funny that someone doesn't reply to my email, but they'll go straight to Twitter and tweet about the issue, which is great. So that's the main feedback. A lot of times it's either they love the intro or they love the issue. So I don't often get comments on specific sections down here, but they'll just like it overall. And let me just show you this. This also, it's kind of like me bragging, but down in this Medium post that we talked about, I collected some, where is it? Oh, by the way, godfather of content marketing, Joe Polizzi, once talked about Content Corner in his podcast.
Okay, now I really didn't dress nicely enough.
Okay, this.
Yes.
So I collected people who tweet about my newsletter. I'm like, I love it when people do this. So here's examples of folks. You probably recognize some of these awesome marketers.
Nice.
So that's where feedback comes in. And I just love when people give me feedback.
Excellent. So are you adding to that on a regular basis?
Not too often, but if something comes in recently and it was really cool, I will add it. Here's one where Masuma, let's see if this plays. She actually screen grabbed her scrolling through.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when she was featured in Twitter Corner, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, so I featured her in Twitter Corner, and this is her showing her scrolling to that section.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I forgot what your second question was.
Oh, so for people who might be like you and they have started
Yes.
their newsletter for a particular reason, or they know
Yes.
they're sending out emails or whatever, kind of any advice, and we can stop the screen share unless you have something else extra special
sure.
hiding up there for us. Any advice for people in terms of like letting your newsletter become a new thing?
I think it's
or evolve. I like the word evolve here. Okay.
It might sound like a no duh or an obvious answer, but let it, meaning
Yes.
meaning don't have a, I mean, my advice is don't have a set concept of what this newsletter should be, just because I only just started out as the whole meetup thing and it just grew. And if I restricted it too much, it wouldn't be what it is today. So like take feedback from your readers, try to like piece together what you think might be working and not working, even though you don't hear it explicitly, and just let the thing grow. And more, it's almost like raising a child. They'll become way different than you remember them as a toddler.
I like that. Okay, so your newsletter is like your baby. You got to let it
That's
grow
right.
up.
It's like a baby, or you could also think of it as a puppy. It needs a lot of feeding and walking and training.
So I'm trying to think of anything else that we should like address. I would love for you to speak to the article that you wrote that like started our relationship, which was why you think that people should send their newsletters as people instead of companies. So what kind of spawned that article and your ideas around that?
Sure. So here, this is an example where I do my newsletter as a labor of love. I have no intention to monetize it, but and I started it when I had a full-time job. But now that I'm a freelancer, it actually can have some connection to business value. Meaning, I think there's a few clients I've landed as a result of the newsletter, and I've now, yeah. Even though that was never my intent, but obviously now that I'm out on my own, it's great. And I've now taken on projects with clients related to email marketing. So I help them launch their own newsletters. And so that piece that you found at CMS Wire is an example where I'm leveraging this labor of love into advice. So a lot of what I wrote in that article comes directly from this content corner. And then I worked with certain clients on establishing a B2B newsletter. So I learned like how they think and how to engage a B2B audience, because there's some differences, B2B newsletter compared to your personal newsletter. And then in the article, I reference one particular example. It's from a software company called Zuora, and they send an email newsletter from their CEO. They provide a subscription platform, like a subscription billing platform. So they call their newsletters subscribed, and it's obviously not his real email address. Like we all know that, but there's like a CEO at address. And I'm not sure if he ghostwrites it or if he writes it himself, but it's literally a very personalized greeting at the top. It's very similar to how I do my intro in Content Corner. And he will then have some curated links of their stuff at the bottom. But I always find it valuable because I don't think he's sharing that same perspective elsewhere. Like there's no blog post that's the same thing as the newsletter. And I just thought to myself, I actually showed that example to other clients to say, maybe we should do something from our CEO, because it's so distinctive and so attuned to the reader. It's like, and this is like the CEO of a company. I'm sharing with you my perspective right now.
It's nice when that happens, right? Because it's like this pulling back the veil and tying a real person to the send. And I think there's like a lot of value in content marketing that is less polished and more about like the actual, like there's a reason to make something look really great if it kind of isn't great, right? Like that creative, do you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes creative can come in and make a really like horrible ebook look amazing and get that email. And so I think with email, it's kind of interesting because we can really design them. Like they can look amazing, but it's still the words that matter. It's still the weight they carry. And so when they come from a particular person who is making decisions for the company that you are spending money with, like it's nice if that person feels like they're talking directly to you, the one customer or the one prospect, versus the universe on a stage with a script and very formulaically polished in that way. So anyone listening, if you're scared to try that sort of intro, just try it. Like I think that it's in email and in marketing right now, the more you can have someone buy into you, your brand, your personal brand as a person, the stronger the relationship will be. We were laughing when we got on this call because I said, "Hi, Dennis, it's nice to like meet you in person." And we realized that we hadn't yet, but we had engaged back and forth because we're both reading each other's newsletters and engaging on some social platforms. One last thing that I wanted to mention, and I'd love your thought on this, is we've engaged a little bit about the idea of being meta. And you mentioned that you had some people become consulting clients partly because of the newsletter and what you were doing with the newsletter that they want you to do with their newsletter or consider that strategy. And so you've made a crack or two online, which I have enjoyed, about like, you know, a newsletter about newsletters, a podcast about podcasts, and these sort of things. And I would make the argument that doing the thing that you are selling, which is what you've done in this situation with those sales, which was like not intentional, but had that effect, proves that you can do the thing.
Exactly.
So I don't know if I've asked a question. I really haven't. Is that something that you have noticed is a new thing, or did it just seem like obvious, like suddenly in 2020, everyone was being like a LinkedIn post about LinkedIn, a Twitter post about Twitter?
I don't think I thought about it too much, but it makes a lot of sense the way you just explained it. So for instance, with Opt-in Weekly, it shows that you're making great use of your own product and showing value in the newsletter itself. Similar to I was just thinking of another example. It's kind of just like almost like good content marketing, or good like the phrase is drink your own champagne, but it's it's not that direct.
Or something gross, which I
yes, that's right. So I think it's important. Oh, that's what I was thinking of. I'm not sure if you've had her on your show, but there's a thought leadership consultant named Lee Price. She's at leepriceideas.com.
Okay.
And she's kind of carved out her own niche, which is she helps, and she went out on her own recently, she helps executives with their thought leadership strategy. And so like she'll help them become thought leaders in their industry. And guess what she had to do for her own business? She had to become a thought leader about the topic of thought leadership. So she's like out there writing about thought leadership. I just got her newsletter today, which is why she's fresh in my mind. And it's like, that's as meta as you can get. She has to demonstrate the thing about being thought leadership on the topic of thought leadership.
I love it. I think we will see more of this as people realize that maybe the way to get someone's attention to be hired to do the thing that you do best is to do the thing you do best.
Is to do it. Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. I feel like that's actually the theme of this conversation at this point, because you went through a newsletter in which you recommended that someone wants to do product marketing, they should just do it. If I forget what the second just do it was, but it was like, just launch a newsletter, I think. And now it's just be meta if you need to be meta.
That's right.
Anything else, any other advice you would give to people who are considering launching a newsletter that you feel like I read something the other day that it was like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't just go read all this advice, just make some mistakes. So I'm curious, was there a mistake you made that you would say like, oh, that one I could get someone past and they shouldn't make it?
I can't think of a mistake right now, but I do have an idea or some advice for someone looking to launch a newsletter, which is—
Let's hear it.
Okay. Because I know if I went to MailChimp and just launched this thing and didn't have much like practice, that it probably would have fallen flat. So my personal story is that for quite some time, I send out an email to friends, and I'm not sure if you're an NFL fan, but I make predictions on some games. And so like it's like a manual newsletter. Like I have 9 friends that I've been emailing for probably 15 years. I call it Pigskin Picks. And I give them my predictions, and then I write like random observations about sports.
Okay.
And sometimes nobody replies, but other times people are like comment and say how I should have been a sports writer, things like that. So I've been doing it for 15 years. So it's like I've had 15 years of practice sending out emails to an audience.
Okay, so I feel like that advice is like, get in the habit of it.
I'm sorry.
Or
Yeah,
like
I forgot.
Try it out before you like start completely.
Exactly.
Like do some dabbling.
Yeah, so it's like pick 10 friends and say, you don't even have to, if they're good enough friends, you don't even have to give them a heads up. Just say, welcome to my experiment. Every week I'm going to share some stuff that I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And like some of them will say, please don't email me, which is a signal. But like, I'm sure you'll get some like good friends who will be there to support you. And just try sending out this. It's almost like how Craigslist started. If you're familiar with that story, it was like, it's his own private email list that grew into a big business. Just like email your friends every so often. Like pick a good set frequency, just like a good newsletter should, and just you'll get some feedback.
That's great advice. I love the dabble, kind of like put your toe in the water. See how you like it. If the water's cold, maybe move on.
If it wasn't meant to be, then you can find other uses of your time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have met you in person. I'm excited about the Content Corner newsletter and the content empire that you are creating.
Thank you.
And I appreciate anyone who, like, I try to take very seriously what I'm curating. And so I don't want to be known for putting in something that like my audience shouldn't care about. And I've found at least twice in my small bit of time since launching that your articles have hit that sweet spot for them where I'm like, this should be in here in this way.
Thank you.
So we content marketers, we can appreciate when someone gets it right? Because it's not always
so nice of you.
Easy.
Yeah, it is hard.
Thank you so much for your time. And I'm going to have all the links in the description, including the link to the Medium page, where you can go find out more about Dennis's newsletter. Thank you so much.